Good afternoon and welcome to the CERIAS Security Seminar for this week, live from Purdue University. Our speaker today is David Wang. David is an assistant professor at DePaul University. He received his PhD here at Purdue's Krannert School of Management, where he was an active CERIAS affiliated student during his time here. His current research interests include both IT and information security management. Please welcome Professor Wang back to campus. David?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you. I'm glad to have a chance to come back here and present one of my papers. Okay, and good afternoon. Okay, so this is about the CIO risk appetite and about security management issues. And my co-author is from Stony Brook. So we are trying to work on this project for a long time. We look at the CIOs, we look at the top management team, we look at the directors. Okay, so the motivation of this paper is kind of straightforward. So we have seen a lot of reports talking about the CIO's role in today's environment. Okay, so we have a lot of really high-profile information security incidents in recent years. So we start to see that information security management have been CIO's top priorities after all these kind of security breaches. Okay, and they say that CIO is not just about investment decisions. It's about all the IT resources. It's also about the security management issues. Okay, and they talk about a lot about the leadership style that may affect how the CIO may make his or her decisions. Okay, so this kind of leadership style may include that how they try to approach these investments, how they try to interact with other people in the team. Okay, but there's one key factor here is about risk aversion, or how the level of risk aversion here. Okay, there are some anecdotal evidence here. Okay, so we can see there are some commentaries or articles about the CIO's risk aversion level. So one stream of them saying that CIOs cannot be risk averse. Okay, simply because that they will try to stop to initiate new projects. They will try to maintain the status quo, or they were not that willing to adapt to new technologies. Okay, but there's some discussions also. They say that after 2008, after 2009, we start to see more and more risk-averse CIOs. And they found out that it has nothing to do with the economic conditions. Okay, it's just like they are not that willing to take risk or trying to do more exploratory things. Okay, so we find this kind of somehow contradictory results from those professional articles. Okay, and we also notice that it's not just about the risk aversion level. They start to talk about that when the CIO is on the board, they can make more strategic decisions. They may have more influential powers over the whole company. Okay, and they say that a lot of times the CIO cannot make the decision, or it looks like the CIO is risk averse simply because that the CEO is trying to limit the actions the CIO may take. So for example, the CEO doesn't want to initiate new projects, and there are some budgetary issues, so the CIO may be limited. Okay, so it's not really about the CIO's personality, but it's more like what kind of position the CIO is in and what's the interaction between the CIO and the CEOs. Okay, so these are our motivations. So we are trying to explore this issue from three different perspectives. Okay, the first one is we want to understand what's the association between CIO risk aversion and the possibility of reported security incidents. Okay, so it's more like, based on our discussion earlier, if a CIO is risk averse, then it may affect its IT investment decisions, how the CIO may approach new issues, how they may do all this deployment of IT resources. So this may affect how they can protect the IT assets or these information assets. Okay, so that's why it may affect the possibility of security breaches. Okay, so it's more like what's the final outcome of the effectiveness of security management. Okay, then we look at that when the CIO is on the board, when this person has more influential power in terms of strategic decisions over the whole company, will that change our results? Okay. And the last one will be the interaction between the CIOs and the CEOs, how these two leadership in the company, when they have some interactions in terms of their personality, will that change our results? Okay. If you have a question, feel free to stop me at any moment. Okay. So interestingly, when we go back to the literature and we try to search for anything, all kinds of literature about the CIOs or in security management, we don't find anything specific about risk aversion. Okay, so we have seen people talk about the role of CIOs, their duties, obligations. This stream of literature are kind of old. They are a long time ago. So it's more like at that time, we don't see that many CIOs. So that's why they start to talk about the roles and the personalities, the characteristics, the obligations. Okay, and then we start to see that, okay, it's not just about a CIO. What's the interaction between this IT leader and the whole top management team? Okay, so that's why that's the time we start to see there's some coordination issues. How IT management, they try to reward their employees, how we look at different coordinations across function heads, all these kind of issues. That's the second stream. Okay, the third stream is about whether they can really create value. The first paper is this one. It's in the early 2000s. Okay, at that time, people start to argue that, okay, so you can have a CIO, you start to put this information technology to a more like strategic positions. That means you focus more on IT issues, but does it really help? Or does the market or the investors, do they really believe that when I create a new position, I can better manage my IT resources, or whether I can better manage my information assets? Okay, so that's why they have this kind of research talking about CIO's impact, or whether they can create the value for the company. So again, that's 15 years ago, okay? And then you have a stream of literature talking about the strategic alignment. Okay, so one of the big issue people have been debating on was the business goal and the IT goals. Okay, so a lot of time they say that in the past, a lot of strategic decisions were made simply because that, hey, I want to do this investment because my competitor is doing that. Okay, so they focus so much on IT investment, but they start to forget that there's some business goals there, and our IT's role and how this IT's role may support our business objectives. Or can we use this information technology to achieve new things? Okay, and the last one, it's closer to our case. It's about the CIO characteristics. Okay, so they start to talk about, okay, this is your leadership style. This is how you can interact with people. This is how you make decisions. Okay, but again, we do not really see anything specifically about the risk aversion or the risk appetite issues. Okay. So after we have seen a lot of papers about the CIO's issues or the top management team, we noticed that there are only two formal journal papers that's about CIO and information security management. Okay, the first one is about the position and compensation. Okay, so the argument is that if there's a CIO position, that means the company focus more on this information technology. They are willing to spend more efforts, they are willing to spend more resources on this domain. That's why they are willing to have this position there. Okay, so from this perspective, it is more likely that this company can have more resources devoted to the IT, this IT perspective. Okay, so probably they can do a better job in managing their information assets. So it's less likely to have some bad things for these companies. Okay, and they found this kind of results. And the second part is about compensation. Okay, So they say that when the CIO's compensation package is different, it reflects a CIO's willingness to devote efforts and the willingness to take risks. Okay, so in this paper, they put it into different positions. So one is CIOs who is only willing to take salaries. Okay, whatever I'm doing, the only thing I will get is just a fixed salary. Okay, no matter the performance is good or bad, my salary will not change. This is one type of CIOs. They say that these CIOs are relatively more risk averse. Okay, they have another part of the story. When the CIO is more willing to take options, stock awards, that means the CIO has more relatively are willing to give more efforts to his position. Okay, because the options and stock awards tie closely to the CIO's performance. Okay, so they say that they can somehow categorize CIOs into different groups based on how they calculate their compensation packet. Okay, and they say that for those fixed part, for the CIOs who are willing to take those fixed salaries, the management is more effective. Okay, the second one also talks about the information security management, but it's more like the composition of the top management team. Okay, so they look at whether the top management team is younger or whether the top management team has more insights about the company. Okay, so they focus more on the coordination issues, the willingness to accept new things, the willingness to take more adventures, okay, and show that based on different age groups, based on different tenures of this top management team, the results of effectiveness of information security management will be different. Okay? Yes?
I understand that you wrote both papers. So are there other papers that is written?
Okay.
Yeah, because
Yes.
I'm just curious because you quoted two papers, but they are both by you. So
Yeah.
are there other literature on this topic around the world for the past 10 years?
There's only several of them, but most of them are conference papers.
Okay.
Right, and they focus on the CIO and the top management team, but it's not specific to information security management. Okay, very few of them.
Okay.
And one of the reasons is that I'm going to talk about this is that there are some technical difficulties to collect the information. Right, that's why. Yep, that's a good question. Yes.
Can you explain your papers a little bit more? Was it like a meta-analysis type of papers, or did you actually conduct a study for these?
Okay, sure. So for both of these papers, we actually try to collect the information security incidents. Okay, it can be from news articles. It can be from the privacy breaches, so we can collect them. And at that time, there was also a database called Data Loss Database. So it's a non-for-profit organization, so it collects all the information. And for CIO and top management team, we collect those information just company by company. So for each company, we try to identify whether there's any CIO positions, okay, and how many people are on the top management team, and their ages, their education background, and all these kind of things. Okay. Okay, so after we review those security management papers, so we switch our focus more specifically to this risk aversion behavior, right? Okay, so we cite this is kind of an old paper, but we like this kind of definition here. They say that the risk is a characteristic of decisions that is defined as the extent to which there is uncertainty about whether potentially significant or disappointing outcomes of decision will be realized. So we know that this is just risk, right? It's uncertainty in the future. Sometimes can be good, sometimes can be bad, but most of the time we worry more about the bad things. Okay, and they have done a lot of, most of these are surveys and experiments. They notice that risk can affect decisions, of course. Okay, they say that each individual is different in terms of our risk preferences. Okay, that's the reason why sometimes we are willing to take more risk. Some other people are not willing to do that. And they say that this attitude is pretty consistent across different contexts. So it's more like this internal thing actually makes all kinds of risk decisions or risk behaviors. Okay, so if we collect all the information about risk aversion or risk behavior or risk decisions, we summarize there are two different possible actions a CIO may take when he or she is risk averse. Okay, one is that if he or she is risk averse, he may want to just maintain the status quo. Okay, so they don't want to do too much exploration. Exploit existing knowledge may be good enough. Okay, so you may not be able to see that the company is trying to learn new things or try to have investments in new areas. Okay, so in this case, we believe that the information security management is weaker, simply because that you are not able to follow the new trends or the new threats. Okay, but it's also possible that when the CIO is risk averse, he or she wants to protect everything. Okay, so it's more like the CIO may overestimate the risk the company is facing. Okay, so we have so many information assets. I have to protect everything. Okay, but the problem here is not really about security management because you are trying to protect everything. The problem is that you may spend too many resources on those less or relatively less important information assets. Okay, so the investment is not that efficient. Okay, but for security management, you may do a better job in this case. Okay, so we look at those anecdotal evidence, we look at those prior literatures in different contexts. We are not able to determine that which one is a more appropriate one from the theoretical perspective. Okay, so that's why we say that this may be just an empirical question that we want to explore a little bit more. Okay. Okay, so if you can remember that we say that from those professional articles, they say that it's not just about the CIO's risk preferences. It's about that whether the CIO is in a really important strategic positions. Okay, so in recent years, we have seen this more and more popular. So they try to invite the CIO to join the board. Okay, so one is that they want to know more about how they do information technology investment. But another perspective is that they want them to be there in order to defend those high-profile security threats. Okay, so they want to bring this up to the strategic level to make sure that they can really do a good job here. Okay, so in this case, if a CIO can be on the board, and we believe that that investment tendency or protection tendency will just be amplified, right? Because now I'm on a strategic position. If I want to protect everything, I will have more decision power. I will have more resources to do that. The same thing. If I just want to maintain the status quo, I try to do less exploratory things. I try to maintain what I'm doing now in order just to exploit my existing knowledge. When I'm at a strategic position, I have more power to implement what I believe to be true. Okay, so that's why we believe that it will amplify it and have a bigger impact here. The last thing is about the CEO's risk aversion. This is kind of tricky here. Okay, so when we look at those anecdotal evidence, we say that a lot of times some companies delegate the IT investment decisions to the CIOs, but some companies don't. Okay, the CIOs still have the final decision right on all kinds of major investment decisions. Okay, and the CEOs knows the overall picture of the company and all the budgetary issues. Okay, so what's the interaction between this CIO and CEO risk aversion level? Okay, so in our case, if the CIO wants to invest more, they try to protect everything, but it depends on the CEO's attitude. So if the CEO is really risk averse, they says that we don't have enough budget, I don't want to initiate new budget, or I don't want to initiate new IT investments, Even the CIO wants to protect things, it may not work as expected. Okay, the same thing. The CEO may also overestimate all kinds of risks because of the CIO's decisions. Okay, so in that case, the CEO will also worry that, we cannot just do this. We need to spend more efforts on how to protect our information assets. Okay, so that's why we say that there must be some interactions, and that interaction may amplify these results or try to reduce the CIO's efforts. Okay, but risk aversion has long been a tough issue for researchers to capture. Okay, so in the past, you will see these two things here. One is called the asset allocation approach. Okay, and the other one is called the lottery payoff to cost ratio approach. Okay, the first one is I try to do surveys or try to do experiment. So it's more like we have a group of 40 people, and I say that now I have a portfolio of less risky and some really risky investment decisions. I'll let you make those decisions. Okay, then I will see that, okay, based on your personal characteristics, you are more willing to take the risky profile, or you are more willing to take the safe profile. Okay, this can only be done through surveys, and most of the time it's just an experiment. Okay, the second one is the lottery payoff to cost ratio. So the meaning of this one is you have a payoff and you have a cost. So we have everyone in the room, so I try to adjust the payoff and the cost. So for example, if you need to spend $10, but you can get $100,000 back, are you willing to spend that $10? Okay, another scenario, you need to spend $10,000, but you can only get $100,000 back with a probability of, for example, 50%. Are you willing to invest that $10,000? Okay, so they are trying to give you different payoff to this cost ratio with all these probability things and see how you can link your personalities to your decisions. Okay, but as you can see that if you want to do this, you need to do surveys, you need to do experiment. And it's almost impossible for us to ask a CIO to do all these surveys or to come here to do an experiment. One is that they are too expensive. There's no way we can pay their time. Okay. The second thing is that when we send a survey to CIOs, if they don't have time to answer your question, we may get something from his secretary or from his staff. Okay, we're not so sure what's the actual information inside all these things. Okay, so we have been searching around to see whether we can get this kind of risk aversion measures just directly from publicly available data or from this information that we can collect with some reasonable efforts. Okay, then we saw something like this. They use this to capture the CEO's risk appetite. Okay, so the original design behind all this thing is that when the CEO is older compared to those younger CEOs, they have a different tendency to take risks. Generally, younger people are more aggressive. They are more willing to take risks in general. The tenure is also an issue. Okay. When you are in the same position for a long time, generally we are more risk averse compared to you are into a new position. We have more energy to do new things. Okay, and it's also about the percentage of the shares you own about the company. Okay, so if you own a lot, we actually tie your benefits actually to the company's survival or to the company's performance. So the action will be different. Or the market value of your stocks and options, right? Okay, so when the market value is going up, you have more actions, you want to take more actions to make sure that it stays there or going further. Okay, so it's more like we are trying to use this age, tenure, shares owned or stocks and options to see how this may relate to this person's risky decisions. But the problem is that we are not able to observe all kinds of risk-based decisions. The only thing we can observe is how the CEO chooses its compensation packet. Okay, so if a CEO says that my salary is only $100,000 a year, but I'm willing to take a huge amount of options and stock awards, then that's something that we need to consider, right? They don't really care about the fixed part. They take more effort-based compensation. Okay, so that's why we try to do this kind of regression models. So the dependent variable is the salary divided by total compensation. Okay, yes, please.
In the options situation for CIO compensation,
Yes.
how do they get awarded options? Is it based on how few breaches they incur, the profitability of the company, how much money they spend versus?
That's an excellent question. CIOs are not like CEOs. So most of the time from our observation, CIOs only get salary or stocks. Very, very few of them have options. Okay, and that's the reason behind, where's my mouse? That's the reason behind that we only use salary divided by total compensation. So it's more like, because we know everyone has a salary. So for example, 60%, everything else is the effort-based. But some CIOs take bonuses, some CIOs take stocks. But you're correct, option is very few. Okay, and based on this model, we are able to capture that these parameters here. So this parameters shows that how this age, tenure, and this percentage of shares owned may contribute to these risk-based actions. Okay, so when we have a new observation here, we can calculate this predictive value. That's what we call the lambda here. Okay, this is the latent risk aversion matrix. So we can somehow quantify this risk appetite based on these regression models. Okay, yes.
So what's the E subscript JT?
Okay, so this one here is the noise or other things that are not captured by everything from here to here. Okay, so it's more like I have included a lot of different factors, but of course there are always something that we cannot capture, right? But that thing will be here. And based on the size of this one and based on the level, we can try to quantify that how good this model is. That means if you have a lot of noise, then your model cannot really explain anything, right? So ideally, we want this part, the alpha 1 to alpha 4 part, can explain most of the things. And the noisy part is just a tiny portion.
So the E subscript J is a constant? Right?
No, it's not a constant.
So that's a variable.
Yep, but this is just the difference between the predictive value and the actual value, the error.
Okay, because I'm trying to understand, in this case, RC is known, right? It's a value that is known.
Yes, it's a value.
The latent risk aversion matrix is?
It's the whole predictive value from here.
So is that known as well?
For new records, no. For new records, we will know alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3, and alpha 4, right? Then for new records, when we have a CIO's age, we plug in the CIO's age times alpha 1 plus alpha 2 times the tenure information we collect plus alpha 3 times the percentage of shares owned that we collect for the new observation. And then we do the same thing here. Then we will have the predictive value here.
So we are trying to find E in that case? What's the unknown? What's the equation trying to solve? And I'm a bit confused, I guess.
Okay,
I don't
so
understand.
for all kinds of models,
Yeah.
there's always a predictive part and a noise part. Okay, so how come we have a noise part? If we can predict this RC here based on everything from here to here perfectly, 100%, then we don't have any error here, of course. But most of the time, it won't be the case, right? So that's why every time when I try to do the prediction, there's always some kind of things that I cannot compare, cannot predict. So for example, when I predict the salary divided by the total compensation ratio, the actual value is 60%. When I try to do the prediction, it's 55.7%. And that difference of 4.3% will be your error. Okay. So how good is this model? If we can have a smaller error, then our model is good. Conceptual. Okay. Okay, so this is our main model. So breach is just a dummy variable. So when the firm has a reported data breach in the following 2 years, okay, based on this CIO information. Okay, we try to have 1 year and 2 year, but we notice that it's really hard for us to define that what is the first year, because the CIO information is based on the reports that we can collect. But the breach may happen around the reporting time or maybe really far away from the reporting time. Okay, so that's why we decide that we'll just take both years into account. Okay, so we have a risk aversion level. We have whether the CIO is also the director. We have the CEO risk aversion level. Okay, then we have a lot of things that may also affect the breach. Company size. Okay, so someone argued that when the company is larger, it's easier for the company to be the target. Okay, there's also some arguments saying that if the company is larger, the company may have a better mechanism or governance structure, so it's less likely to have the breach. Okay, but we don't know that. Someone argued that when you have the age of this top management team, okay, then it may change. When your market to book value is different, the breach probability is different because you focus more on the intangibles compared to the tangibles. It's more like the high-tech company. The same thing here for these R&D issues here. The same thing, they say that, okay, when you have a higher leverage ratio, you may not have enough resources to do investments, or you may be limited. Board size, independent board size percentage, they say that it's part of your governance structure. They are also represent the coordination issues you have from the directors. Okay, director age, you have the director's gender. Someone says that if you have more female on the directorship, then the management is better. Okay. Then we also have different types of industries, financial institutions, whether you're high growth or low growth, you are in a highly litigation industry. That means you have a lot of this kind of litigation issues in the past, high-tech companies or not, whether there's any yearly effects across all the time period we have here. Okay. So based on what we are trying to do, we collect everything that we can have from 2003 to 2015. Okay, so we have all the executive information and compensation from a database called ExecuCom. Okay, all the firm characteristics are from CompuStat. Okay, and board directorship data in the past is called Risk Matrix, but now it's called ISS. Okay, so this is how it looks like. So we have firm year observations of 2,200 CIOs with compensation information. Okay, so we have some missing data. The final sample, we only have 1,100 firm year observations. So let me show you that one of the breaches we collected. So this is something that we get it from the public information. So date made public, the time that the security go public, so February the 9th, 2017. The company is Arby's. Okay, we know the location is Atlanta, Georgia. It's a hack. Okay, type of organization, it can be a government agency, it can be a non-for-profit. This is for just a general business operations. And they say that there's a loss of 335,000 credit card and debit card information. Total records is just 335,000. Okay, so we collect this one from the Privacy Rights Clearinghouse. Okay, so we just dump everything, and we also have the information from data loss database. Okay, so in order to make sure that we have everything we want, we also search for all the news articles, okay, and see whether we miss any major ones. Okay, you can look at this one, reported breach by year for all these public traded companies. You can see that when we try to include everything, this number is unbelievably small. Okay, that means a company that is public traded, we have the CIO information, we have the compensation information, we have the firm characteristics, we can only find 49 reported breaches in our sample. All the rest are no breaches, no reported breaches here. Okay, we're going to do a correction of this one later. Okay, if you look at this by industry, most of them are still in the manufacturing industry. Okay, about half of them. Okay, we have some for the wholesalers, we have some for financial institutions, we have some other business services. Okay, we have some high-tech companies and IT services here as well. Okay, but I expected we don't have much for agriculture firms, and we don't have anything for these mining things, right? Because information assets is not the main thing here. Oops. Okay, so we have the descriptive statistics that you can take a look. Okay, so I want to show you this one. Okay, so the company size on average is about $7 billion after the logarithm transformation. Okay, R&D, this is the percentage. So it's about 5% of your total sales revenue. Okay, board size, on average, you have 9 people on the board. Okay, it's expected. Independent board director size, on average, about 78% of the board are independent. Okay, and we have this director tenure 8 years, age is 61 years old. Okay, but you can see that even the median is about 61 years old, so it's really close. Okay, and we also do a test about see whether they are really different between non-breach firms, or there's no reported breach firms, and the reported as breach firms. You can see that the aversion level is totally different here. Okay, and whether the CIO is also the director is different. The company size is also different. Okay, R&D level is also different. So these two groups of people are basically, there are two different groups of companies. Okay, and in order to justify, yes, please.
Can you explain what was the sample size for all those, by any chance?
Here?
Yeah, what was the sample size for all this?
Okay, so it's
1,707
records. We have some more missing values, so that's why.
Are those like company records?
Yes.
Okay.
Firm event observations. Okay. The first thing we want to do is, do you remember that we said that a professional article says that CIOs are getting more and more risk averse across time, and it has nothing to do with economic conditions? So that's the first thing we want to look at it. This line here is the risk aversion level based on our estimation. So you can see there's some kind of fluctuation, okay? But this is probably the reason why that there's an article saying that it's dropping. They are getting more and more risk averse, okay? But it comes back and it goes down again. So overall, if you draw a trend line here, okay, this value is getting smaller and smaller. So they are getting more and more risk averse. Okay, so that trend is correct. And if you look at this line up here and look like this one here, it's more like they are perfectly complement to each other. So when the CIO is getting less risk averse, more risk averse, and then we'll have fewer breaches, or the other way around. So you can see that when there's a dump here, then you will see a peak down here. When you see there's a valley here, then you will see a peak here. Okay, so this gives us some kind of intuition about what's going on across time. Okay, but if you look at this regression results, overall, when the CIO is more risk averse, they are less likely to have security breach incidents. So this confirms our argument, the second one. When they are more risk averse, they try to protect everything. So the main issue becomes that it's not in our scope, but the main issue becomes that when they are so risk averse, the IT investments or the investment on information security will probably be quite inefficient. That will be the bigger issue here, right? Because you spend too many resources on things that are not that valuable, okay? And when the CIO is also the director, okay, and it also has a risk aversion level here. When we look at the interaction term here, this one suggests that when the CIO is the director, compared to the case when the CIO is not the director, the result is getting stronger. Okay, so that means when the CIO is at a strategic position, he has the power to amplify that impact in terms of his or her personality. Okay, and how about this one? When I look at the risk-taking CEOs and the risk-averse CEOs, you can see that we only see a result here. Okay, this looks quite contradictory to our intuition, right? Because we said that probably they will have a bigger impact because both of them are more risk-averse. But actually, it's not. Okay, so when you have a risk-averse CEOs, the results, it's only on this side. Okay, meaning that when you have a risk-averse CEOs, it's not really about investment issues. It's also about protections, and whether this protection about information assets or this kind of investments can be consistent with the CIO's decision based on his or her risk profile. Okay, so when you have a risk-taking CEOs, then the story is different. Okay, and we have some additional results. We try to decompose the breach into different things. Okay, this one shows that when you have a risk-averse CIOs, we only see that result for internal breaches. That means someone has access to your system or is affiliated. Okay, so for example, your contractor, your employees, okay, so that protection is good for this kind of internal breaches, but this one does not really work for hackers' activities. Okay, everything comes from outside the company. And this only works for digital assets. It has nothing to do with physical things. So this overprotection argument, when you are going to lose your hard drive, you take your laptop to Starbucks and you just put it there and then you forgot to bring it back with you. All these kind of physical things cannot be protected. Okay, that's expected. And we did some robustness tests here. The first thing we did is the rare event correction. If you can recall that because of our simple selection process, we end up with a really, really tiny amount of companies with information security breaches. Okay, that might cause some problems because that it's more like a fraud case. You have a tiny portion of this event group that can be picked. Okay, so there's a correction techniques that we use that developed from a Harvard professor. So we just use it. So basically, this rare event correction process is more like the algorithm will try to recompute the distribution or the weight between the event group and the control group. Okay, so this kind of methods has been used in those natural disasters, earthquakes. So as you can expect it, we try not to have a lot of natural disasters, right? Okay, or has been used for those cancer research because it's rare relatively. Okay, and our results remain quite similar. We also try to look at this CIO power here because when we search for this CIO position, we notice that a lot of CIOs are not just CIOs. It can be the CIO with the chief operating officer, or I'm the CIO and I'm also the chief marketing strategy person, okay, or I'm the CIO but I'm also related to the manufacturing processes. Okay, so we are trying to see that when this CIO is not just pure IT person, when this CIO needs to get involved in a lot of different functions or operations of the companies, whether our results will still hold. Okay, and we show that when a CIO has multiple functions, and that's the time we can see these results. So it's more like my IT investment decisions. Now I can consider all other functions into account, not just myself. Okay, so overall, this is our basic test or initial results. So we try to show that when a CIO is risk averse, it's more like the CIO is more likely to overprotect the information assets. So there may be other issues about investment efficiencies. Okay, and the interaction between the CIOs and the CEOs may also affect the results. So whether they are both risk aversion or one is really has a really high risk appetite, is not totally risk averse, but the other one is to the other extreme. Okay, and the last thing is that when the CIO has a bigger power, is more impactful in the company, his personality or his investment decisions will have a bigger impact and is different. Okay, so that's basically what we have so far. Okay, and thank you for all the comments. Do you have any other questions, suggestions? Yes.
Going back to your main model, was there any certain variables that are not, relevant for that model, or because it seems like a lot of variables you were dealing with?
Yes. So, where's my memo? This thing.
Yeah.
Almost all this director age, this gender, this tenure issue.
Were all found to be correlated and associated.
Yes.
Okay.
And actually, we didn't test one thing that is in the literature. They say that should not be a linear model.
Okay.
They say that because the tenure is not like when you have a smaller amount, when you have a smaller experience with this company, or when you have a long experience with this company. They say that it's not a linear relationship with bridge. They say it should be parabola, or it should be a nonlinear relationship, because when you're younger, when you're older, it doesn't make sense. It's more like whether you change to a certain point, then your concept may change to another direction, right? So in this case, we may need to do something else with those model settings. Yep.
One more question.
Sure.
Why didn't you include any decision metrics or anything, or personality variables in your model?
Yeah, we are trying to do that. We're collecting education, experience, those things. But we end up with only 1 year we can only get 1 year of the data. Yeah, so we are trying to search backwards, but it takes some time to get everything. So yeah, but that's a good suggestion, yes. Okay, other comments, anything? No? Okay, so thank you for coming and your suggestions.